morning everyone on this quite strange day, talking about open source and free software, which we have always called a revolution, in the middle of a revolution actually happening out here. But I will try to focus on what is important here, and I will avoid making any political statements at this time. Maybe next time we can do more about that. So, introduction, I'm going to talk about the history of open source, open standards, open content, and I will try to give you a brief overview of the way we at Red Hat think about all of this and what we see for the future coming out of this. This is me, Wildeboer. This is my avatar. You can find it everywhere on the internet. Here's my contact data. I'm the official evangelist as Red Hat, which means I'm not good enough to be a sales guy, and I'm not technical enough to be a consultant, but I can talk quite well, and that's why my manager said, okay, we make you evangelist and you keep on talking because that's the best. So, you can reach me under this email address. You can find my blog under jan.wildeboer.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Doppler, on Xing, on wherever, Google+, and sorry for that, I'm not on Facebook. I refuse Facebook for almost religious reasons, data protection, privacy, and etc. Now, with that, let's turn to the history, because history is something we should all know, and there are three really important things. So this young man, Richard Matthew Stallman, created the concept of free software, the idea behind it, and he put it in some nice words. He said, we need to make sure that there is no artificial divide between users and developers. Every user can be a developer and should have the freedom to do so. And proprietary software companies try to make this change and keep you away from being too creative. That was the reasoning from 1985. Times have changed significantly since then, based on this idea. So the idea behind free software is to be able to work with any kind of software you use to make it, to make changes to it, to distribute these changes to anyone you want. So open source and free software are not the same, but we will not go into the deep details of that long-standing war between the BSD and the GPL license. That's something that I typically save for a good dinner with some nice drinks and good music in the background. Now, the second really important man is this one man. Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He created what many people nowadays call the Internet, which technically speaking is wrong. The Internet, technically speaking, is a bunch of millions of connected computers using one single protocol called TCP/IP. And TCP/IP is a wonderful fundament and a very free fundament to put protocols on top of it. One of these protocols is HTTP and HTML, what we call the Internet, the web pages, and this guy created it. Why did he create it? To share the results of the work at CERN in Geneva, where right now they're working on the Large Hadron Collider. All of this stuff, you saw that, particles that can fly faster than light, which technically should not be possible. And thank God it's Linux machines examining the results of these research, so we can be sure it's not biased. Now, what did he do? He created the web in a way that's quite interesting, because he said we need to make sure that everyone can participate. And that's why he put a very specific regime behind this, which is managed by the W3C nowadays. The W3C does not define standards in the way that you normally would hear them, because they would call it a standard. For whatever historical reasons, the W3C still calls them technical recommendations. And the most important thing here is that what the W3C does is available to everyone. It is an open standard. Open standard in the sense that everyone can participate in the standard setting process. Everybody can use it, everybody can implement it without having to pay royalties for so-called intellectual property rights like patents and copyrights and concepts. And this freedom makes sure that the web is as open as it is nowadays, and although it is under attack right now from many, many different fields who try to limit the freedom on the internet, it's up to all of us to defend the freedom that this man gave us and created. Now, that's still not enough. We have open source, we have free software, we have open standards, so we have the software to do stuff, we have the standards to communicate with each other in a standardized way, but still we have the content itself. And this is where Lawrence Lessig kicks in. He's the creator of Creative Commons, which is a concept to creatively interpret the copyright regime to ensure the freedom that we want to see for content. And he makes some very interesting statements, and I guess many technical people here in the audience can fully concur to that. Many data we have created in the past 20 to 30 years is already inaccessible. We cannot read our own data. We have created digital graveyards, digital toxic waste, petabytes of them, on magnetic tapes hidden in caverns somewhere deep down in mountains, and we cannot work with our own data. And while we can access the creative works of the 16th century by going to museums, and because they are in the public domain, there is no copyright on them anymore, we can work with them, we are losing all of the work that we are doing right now ourselves. And this is dangerous. We should really make sure that whatever we create is sustainable. So the most important thing here is data outlives applications, and having data formats that are limited to a specific application does not help us moving forward to create digital heritage where future generations can use the knowledge that we create right here, right now. And then, of course, there's this young man, Linus Torvalds. Linus Torvalds created the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel was not what he wanted to do. What he wanted to create was a simple system to cope with the different operating modes of the 8386 processor. And the first thing he wrote was a process scheduler that would switch between two processes. The one would print the letter A on the screen, and the other one the letter B. And he opened this very bottle of beer, and in Finland, beer is very expensive. When his screen started filling with A, B, 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 and he thought he would be the king of the world and get all the girls at university, etc. And well, that didn't really work. The next step was then to make more of this process scheduler. So he asked around on the internet and asked the right people to get a copy of the POSIX specification, which defines the system internals of Unix-like systems. He got that copy, which is 600 pages. He started to implement it, and the first version of the Linux kernel is a poster we at Red Hat still have. It fits on a poster. And we still have this poster. We hand it out to our people and to everyone interested. I didn't bring them with me, but if you want one, we can always discuss that. And this very first kernel, then, you know, he spit out this famous email, which is, I think, the biggest understatement in the IT history ever. So he said, "Hello everybody out there using Minix," which was the system used at universities at that time from a Dutch professor. "I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big," and etc. Now here I am from Red Hat, a company with $1 billion in revenue, with a $10 billion market cap, a publicly traded company employing more than 4,000 people worldwide, based on free software and based on the work that this young man did. And that tells you something about the IT world. You know, things can change radically and drastically in a matter of years, and many people won't even notice. And let's keep it that way. Let's keep this creativity rolling, because that's what defines us. This is how Linus looks nowadays. He has grown up. He is married. He works for the Linux Foundation. He still does kernel maintenance. And you can see the biggest difference between before here and now is the one thing that we, open source professional, all did. We became very stable over the years, as you can see. We did a statistic on a kernel symposium of 10 years ago where we handed out t-shirts, and the typical size was small and extra small. And the last time we did that statistic 2 years ago, the majority was XXL, so that tells you something. Now, this leads us to the new now world that we are living in. Yes, you have been a very good developer. Yes. So, which leads us to the new now, and the new now is open source as a development model has proven itself. People are using open source solutions because they deliver value. And most customers, most users of open source are not really interested in licenses. They care about good solutions. And having a good solution tends to be more and more in the open source space. That's what we care for. That's what we work on. But open source is not that big a revolution as many people would love to paint it. It's a normal, natural thing for developers to share their knowledge with other developers and make stuff better. And that's what open source does. What we now are seeing are many customers say, we see how open source works for companies like Red Hat, for the community at large. Can we as a company use these same principles inside our organization? We see open source methods being used in a lot of our customers and they ask us, how can we build projects internally, new products, the open source way? They're not necessarily going to publish everything as open source, but at least they're interested in the methods we are using. Now, this is something that I love to teach to everyone. This is no problem at all, because this really helps us moving forward. Now, how do we do this in practice? As Red Hat as a company, you have 100,000 open source projects out there, and all of them have different leadership models and etc. And it's a really complicated, messy world out there. We take this, we combine this into community efforts, JBoss.org, Fedora distribution, and snapshot that and stabilize that and give a guarantee for 10 years on the stability of the system, on the API stability, and etc. And that's how we make our money. That's how we can employ 4,000 people working on free software. And it's a model that has worked and has proven itself. Now, we still have to make money in the right way, and how do we do that? To put it in extreme simple words, we have decoupled feature generation, so code development, from revenue generation. With Red Hat you buy a subscription, and the subscription gives you access to all versions that we currently support. You as a user, as a customer, are free to decide which version of Linux you're taking, how long you're going to use it. If you use it 32-bit or 64-bit, there is no upgrade pricing, there is no downgrade pricing. You get full access to the stack that we produce. Now, enough of the marketing stuff, but as you can see, the world is running on Linux in large parts. When you wake up in the morning and you switch on your laptop, your mobile, whatever stuff, and you connect to your wireless LAN at home, to your DSL router, this DSL router typically runs Linux. If you switch on your wonderful new LCD or plasma TV, inside it runs Linux. And if you step into your car and you switch on your TomTom navigation device, I would be lost without a TomTom here in Cairo, trust me.
TomTom itself lost.
Yeah. And TomTom runs on Linux. Now, Linux is almost everywhere, just not on the desktop. And I think we shouldn't compete with Windows there. Microsoft is doing their job, and we are doing stuff on the server side, at least as Red Hat. So, from that, I will not torture you with the wonderful world of licenses and etc. There's one point I want to make, and that is our whole system of open source was built on copyright. It was an agreement in 1985 in the GATT, the Global Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, which regime should cover software, which was a difficult decision. Should it be patents? Should it be copyright? The fundamental decision was copyright, and that has served us all well, the whole IT market. Currently, we're under pressure with software patents and the excessive use of intellectual property rights and standards, which does not allow us to, for example, have MPEG decoders in our distribution, because the MPEG Licensing Association will not give us a license for open source implementations, and all of that stuff. That's stuff that I work on as a lobbyist, which is part of being an evangelist. I go to Brussels and all these other people to talk about that. Now, what the real important thing is here, and why open source is so important there, is interoperability. Interoperability is a difficult beast. So it is right now broken. I picked these two medium-sized software companies, SAP and Microsoft, for my example. You as a user want to use the business data from SAP in your Microsoft Office applications. How is this done? SAP and Microsoft sit around the table, they draw up a giant list of contracts and intellectual property agreements and patent cross-licensing stuff, and suddenly the data starts flowing. It's closed source, of course, it's under NDA, and when somebody updates one part of this stack, you'll have to wait for the other one to cope with it and get it all done, which is working, sort of, but it leads to this picture, which is a spider web of contracts, of limiting factors. And now if you're a small startup company, if you're a student group here at the university, and you create a wonderful solution, you have a real problem entering this market, because you have to have all these contracts, you have to sign all these special deals and etc. This is not a free market. This is not what we in capitalism have always believed in. So, is there a better way to do this? And I think this is, seeing the topic, talking about governments and interoperability, I think there is. And this better method is what we call open standards-based solutions. Now, we're not alone in this. Microsoft supports open standards, Oracle, IBM, and everyone, because they see there is a value in there. Now, what happens with open standards is, now, if I want to have interoperability, I need to implement the open standard in a good way, which I can verify on the standard level, independently by independent third parties. And once I have open standards, I should be, reality is always more complicated, I should be interoperable with any other market participant, and I don't have to ask for permission if it is a true open standard. So using open standards as an intermediate layer for interoperability and communication is, in my opinion, the most important thing for governments to work on. If you create data and you do not store it and not distribute it using open standards, at least as an alternative, if not your main modus operandi, then you are doing something bad for society and for everyone else. So working with open standards creates a better picture because a standard-based market simply works better. It's a one-to-N relation, and now we can all exchange information and do it the right way. But you can do it good or wrong. So I'm using OpenOffice LibreOffice, which uses the ODF format, the Open Document format. This is Microsoft's version of a document format called Microsoft Office Open XML, OOXML, which is 7,228 pages of specification. If we have a developer here in the room who volunteers to implement this over the weekend, yes, we can do it. No, we can't. And we shouldn't. So what happened here, it was a giant drama and etc. My point was, open standards and open standards are not the same. You need to carefully look at, does it make sense? Is it easy to implement? Is it easy to use? And all of these criteria. This is stuff governments can care about. This is stuff government policy should care about. And this is happening right now all across this planet. And we have these discussions everywhere. So this is my girlfriend. This is Nelly Kroes from the European Commission. She is Vice President of the European Commission. She's in her 70s and one of the smartest girls I ever met. Nelly Kroes has a few statements, and then I specifically like these. I will start with a confession. I'm still a big fan of open standards, and many authorities have found themselves unintentionally locked into proprietary technologies, which is expensive and cannot be afforded anymore. She also criticized just yesterday in a very public speech that the copyright system is fundamentally failing in the digital age, and we need to have a very hard revolutionary reform of the copyright system. That's why I like her. And whenever we meet in Brussels, it's really fascinating to see how she fully understands all of this and puts the weight of the European Commission behind this stuff. Now, there is another Dutch guy, Frank Heemskerk, who put it into policy in the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a policy to use open standards. Note, not necessarily open source. If Microsoft implements an open standard in the best perfect way, it's their market to take. I have no problem with that. And the new version of Microsoft Office will have a decent implementation of ODF, the Open Document Format 1.2. And if they deliver a better Office solution, hey, this is competition, but now it's fair competition. If we can make a better working implementation with LibreOffice or OpenOffice or whatever new project, we can fairly compete. And competition is important for a market. Now, I won't bother you too much with all of this. Going the open source way means to accept this openness, this radical transparency on every level. And my strong advice to everyone working in governments, working in revolutions, be it here in this room or at Tahrir Square, make sure that we are moving ourselves into a world that does not limit us in intellectual property and vendor lock-in, etc. True openness starts with everyone here in this room. So start using open technologies as much as you can, and join the open source way, which can be the RedHat way, and very soon you can look as evil as I look. Thank you for listening. Final note, this presentation with all of these animations and stuff was not made with Flash. This is pure SVG, scalable vector graphics, made with Inkscape, using an open font, and all of this stuff is completely free and open standards based.